You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new Saucy Nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey, barbecue, garlic, parm, and of course the hot variations of all three of those. Or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper. I dare you, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you have never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3. We are back from our playoff adventure. We should be playing Lunatic Fringe by Red Ryder, which was featured in Vision Quest, which is the greatest movie ever made about high school wrestling. But that is neither here nor there. Ari, we got to talk about what Kirk Herbstreit said on Saturday night, because you and I got into this discussion at lunch yesterday, and it was one of those that it went on for so long, and we were like, this is the show. Like, we need to have this conversation on the show.
Yeah. It's multifaceted because one, there's a Herbstreit discussion in terms of who he is, where he played, where he's from, and how he talks about Ohio State and analyzes them. The second is Ohio State in general and Ryan Day. And then the third is the Lunatic Fringe that extends not just from Ohio State's fan base to other Big Ten teams of the entire country, right? Like, everybody's got a Lunatic Fringe. And I don't know if I think the percentages of the Lunatic Fringe are bigger at places. Like, do you think it's it's
also, there's a difference between the Lunatic Fringe and the general sentiment among the fan base. Like, this is a piece of this that I think we need to discuss, is how much of the angst about Ryan Day is the Lunatic Fringe, which every fan base has, and how much of it is just how everybody feels. Or not everybody, but a lot of people, like a significant percentage.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. And I think maybe, Andy, you're the host. You tell me, but like, play the clip first, and then let's get into it. So people who haven't heard what he said know.
Yeah, we've got this is the Herbstreit clip from the broadcast the other night. This is Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit. At this point, Ohio State is crushing Tennessee. They're talking about what it means going forward. Producer River, play that clip, please.
He's heard about it.
Now, Kirk, how much of this softens the blow of that Michigan loss? More work to do, right, for folks to forgive and forget that one? I can't
speak on behalf of the Lunatic Fringe. I'm not sure how they operate. Yeah, the Lunatic Fringe at Ohio State is as powerful as anywhere in the country.
How big is the Fringe?
It used to be 8 to 10. I think it's grown now to about 15 to 20. So I don't know. I'm sure they'll be happy tonight, be fired up about what the Ohio State team did. But God forbid they lose to Oregon. They may want to fire them again.
But that's not reality. I mean, no. That's the thing. When you hear pundits on this network and other places talk about that with certainty, it's nonsense, frankly. I mean, the public doesn't pull the trigger and get rid of the coach.
No.
The administrators do, and they're behind them.
Yeah. First Take tried to fire him. They thought he was done. So I'll be excited to see what they talk about on Monday after this performance. They had him out. They're trying to find replacements. But here he is. He's still got his hat on. He's still coaching.
JC in the chat brings up a very important point here. The Lunatic Fringe equals the active, toxic social media tribe. General sentiment, those people apathetic enough not to go Saturday. Which one is more dangerous? This is the key. JC, you got it. JC, you are very smart. You understand this. Kirk Herbstreit can say what he wants about percentages and Lunatic Fringe. The fact that there were 30,000 people in the stadium wearing orange tells you everything you need to know about the general sentiment.
See, I also think that's true. But you know what was more concerning? And maybe they're the same thing. It's, it was the ticket prices. That's what allowed it, right? And
they weren't super high. These weren't Tennessee fans paying $1,000 a seat to do this. They were
Yeah.
paying $150, $200 a seat.
And the reason why there was 100, it's simple supply and demand. Less people wanted to go, which made the ticket prices more affordable and gave Tennessee the opportunity to do what it did in terms of how many people came. Now, from the press box view, there was a ton of orange. The thing with the Ohio Stadium press box is you can't see the other side of the stadium.
Right. The other side was pure scarlet.
So the other side of the stadium that you weren't seeing in all the pictures was completely red. So it's not like, I saw people say there were 40,000 Tennessee fans. That's not true. There's no way it was 40,000.
But 30 is a pretty safe estimate, I would say.
But if it was 25 or 30, that's still way more than a usual Ohio State fan or stadium would allow to get in. So I think that there is a certain sentiment of apathy when it came to this team. Now, this is a very complex discussion because from a Lunatic Fringe standpoint, you know how my temperament is online, right? Like I read what people say to me and I respond to people. And a lot of times in my career, I have made mistakes, not just with Ohio State, because the Lunatic Fringe extends beyond just Ohio State. Everybody like Tennessee, all Twitter is pretty violent too. You know what I mean? Like there's a segment of all fan bases that are the same.
LSU, Auburn, Florida, Michigan. It's all the same. Yes.
Everything. Yeah. Especially when their team is cornered. When teams are under investigation or someone might get fired, like it gets particularly bad. The question is, and here's where I've made the mistakes, Andy. I've allowed the loudest segment of fans, the ones on Twitter, that toxic tribe that JC was referring to, impact what I think most people think.
Right.
And I don't know if that has been a mistake because I don't like with the Lunatic Fringe, they might be the loudest, the most aggressive, the most vile at times. But does the Lunatic Fringe reflect what the regular fan thinks, but is willing to say it and act in a certain way to be the loudest? Or do they think irrationally? Like, that's the difference to me. It's like,
well, I think the Lunatic Fringe is the group that thinks irrationally, but the key is figuring out where the Lunatic Fringe stops and where the rank and file fan begins.
But when they think irrationally, it is still just an inflamed view of what most people probably think, right? They might
a more extreme view of what most people probably think.
Ohio State fans have been and were out on Ryan Day. Like, that wasn't a Lunatic Fringe thing. Okay. No. And we can get into the Ryan Day discussion all we want. We will. But Ryan Day, and we both wrote this in our column, sets out 3 goals before the year. This is Ryan Day doing this. This is what every Ohio State coach does. Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship, and compete or win the national title. Ohio State has not captured any of those goals since 2020. And the question to you is, if you're getting paid $10 million a year to lead a program that is as passionate about winning the rivalry game and competing at that level, and you accomplish 0 of those goals, and you have seniors going out without having accomplished any of those goals for the first time in God knows how long. I've been meaning to look that up. I still haven't looked it up. It's either the 90s or longer. Then people have a right to be upset. Like, so, and it's not irrational standards. It's the standard that the coach himself has set out for the program. So I don't know, like, the Kirk Herbstreit angle to this is interesting because he used to live in Columbus. He played at Ohio State and he left Columbus, right? I think that when you are the most famous personality in college football, in terms of visibility, it's a difference between him going to Kroger and you going to Kroger in Gainesville, or me going there when I lived there, right? Like, sometimes we get recognized in public, but rarely.
Right. He can't go anywhere without being recognized. So and everybody has an opinion and wants to share it with him.
And here's the thing about Kirk that I think is a compliment. There are certain analysts on ESPN who never pick against the place that they went to or are constantly complimenting the place that they went to. Kirk, on the other hand, has been very critical of Ohio State in critical times. And
when it needs to be, yes. Not when he doesn't need to be, although Ohio State fans would disagree, but when he needs to be.
And like, listen, this isn't a shot at Desmond Howard because everybody's got their shtick, and I'm sure Michigan fans love him, but Desmond Howard has never picked against Michigan on the show once. So like everybody knows when you're getting Desmond Howard's viewpoint on what's going on, you're getting it through the Michigan lens. So, and that doesn't mean that he's not successful or not good at his job. It just means that that's what he does. And Kirk has never been that way. And I think there's a certain expectation from Ohio State fans that Kirk plays that role, and he never has. So here's the other thing too. Because Ohio State has been so successful over the course of the history of the program, especially in the modern media era, there hasn't been a ton of time to criticize them. And I ran into this when I was on the beat because I did my damn best when I was covering that team to do it through a fair, unbiased, and reasonable lens. So when things went wrong, when they rarely did, whether it be recruiting misses or losses or coming up short on goals, and again, I was covering the entire Urban Meyer era. They beat Michigan every time. So like there wasn't a ton of opportunity to be negative. But when there was opportunity to be negative, I was negative because I wanted to reflect what the fans felt. I wanted to feed the fans what they deserved, and I wanted to keep people informed. And as a result of this, I think I created or had a reputation in Columbus, Ohio as a shit stirrer. Like people think that. I had an assistant coach once call me that.
I can't believe anyone would ever call you Ari a shit stirrer.
I know, but I resented it. Because,
you are.
Like, and even if you go and look at how I covered the end of the Urban Meyer era and the scandal with the former assistant coach who doesn't deserve to have his name said, I was very critical. So when I come onto the national scene, because of my past, people call me a homer, but the people in Columbus don't like me. So I don't have a home. And the thing that bothers me is that you have to be critical even of the places that are successful at times. It doesn't mean that Ohio State stinks but are you telling me right now it's not a fair time to be critical of the coach? Because if it's not, then when is?
Well, let's Bucko Dan in the chat with a very good point. Being upset about losing the biggest rivalry in college football 4 years in a row and questioning if Day is the right guy is not irrational behavior. There is a smear job going on. And this is also a case, and we can widen the lens here. It doesn't all have to be about Ohio State, because this is a case of people outside saying, how dare you feel this way about your own team? And this bothers the people inside more than anything else, because we see this a lot of times with teams and programs that are really successful that don't meet their own goals. And then fans get upset. And then fans from the outside are like, well, I'd kill to have your team's success. Why are you complaining? Well, they're complaining because it's not meeting their own standard. And that's I've noticed that covering LSU coaching searches, Florida coaching searches, Auburn coaching searches. It's like that every time. You have people going, well, what are you complaining about? You're too hard on these guys. How come you keep firing these guys? Well, because they're not getting what they want.
And
they're the customer.
I'm going to say this right now. And I've said it already in columns, so it's not going to be I think it is 1,000% rational to talk about whether or not you think Ryan Day should be fired right now.
I think it is rational to talk about that. And I've been very clear on how I feel about it. I've said over and over again, and this is not me saying this because I think Ryan Day should be protected by any stretch. I just think I've been around enough athletic directors and enough of these decisions to say no athletic director is going to fire his coach in this situation. They're not going to do it. But by the same token, this situation in particular is so toxic. And you heard what Kirk Herbstreit said. And it's strange that we're talking about this after they crushed Tennessee. But it's a legitimate concern because Kirk's right. If they lose to Oregon, it goes right back to this. If I'm Ryan Day...
Because you can't go into the playoffs saying national title or bust, and then that changed because they won a game by 20.
Right, and only make it to the second round. Right. If I'm Ryan Day, I might just say to hell with it. I might do that for my own sanity. So
Yeah.
it's not a far-fetched thing. If they lose to Oregon, which they might, they have lost to them already this season, that he says to hell with this.
But it also isn't just losing to Oregon. So we got to go into this part of the discussion, okay?
Well, before we do that, Ari, we're going to do that, and we're going to play a clip from your friend Doug Lesmerises. But I thought was really before we do that. Nope.
Oh.
We're going to talk about something you love.
Okay.
Panini America, makers of the finest, most collectible sports cards on the planet. I have a new box here of Panini Prism draft picks that Panini sent me that we're going to open on the show in a few days. It's going to be glorious. We got 4 packs in this box. On average, 4 autographs in one of these boxes. We're going to have a fun time with that. They have NIL deals with the likes of DJ Lagway and Arch Manning. So you might pull their cards out of a pack. Collect your favorite teams, college, pro, get your NFL cards with your draft pick guys still in their college uniforms. It's amazing. PaniniAmerica.net to begin your collection. Ari, his desk is covered with what they call nukes in the hobby.
I opened my box last night because I'm an addict. So
let's see what you got. Let me see what you got.
So my hit, that is a really exciting box because you could hit like an Arch Manning auto or DJ Lagway auto, and those are the only places where you can get an auto from them.
If I get a DJ Lagway autograph living where I live, do I need security?
Yeah, you might need to put a lock on your front door if you don't have one. I hope you do already, though.
I think we do.
This is Jalen Milroe.
Wow.
Cracked ice, numbered to 99. That was the biggest hit that I got out of that box. But you can also hit color blasts and mangas, which are like the Japanese or Asian artwork of like cartoon character. I think it's like a way of like animeing.
It is.
I don't. It's not my world, but
not Ari's bag.
Cool.
But
yeah,
Panini cards are.
Yeah, and there's only 4 packs in there, Andy. So next time when you open the box, we should just do all 4 packs because it doesn't take a long time to rip, and it's super exciting because there's basically an auto, or there is an auto in every pack. So it's really cool. Check it out, and Panini's really done a good job with the NIL stuff, the future players. And if you want to collect guys before they're in the pros and have cards, like get our Arch Manning card like right now, that would be awesome. So yeah, cannot wait. Thanks Panini for sending it. Made my Christmas and Hanukkah better. And I've got a stack that I've got to sort through over here, but it's fun. It's fun.
Very nice. By the way, while we're talking about Panini, and go to PaniniAmerica.net to begin your collection, DOT in the chat, who's also an Ohio State fan. So
yeah,
I want to point out that what we've said does not represent all Ohio State fans. This is something that they're debating amongst themselves. So DOT says, y'all want to fire a coach for losing to a team that made the playoff 3 times straight and won a national championship one year and then lost to a bad version of that team. That's not smart. It's emotional. And that is an Ohio State fan saying that I got Ryan Day's back here. It's not universal, but it's also not a lunatic fringe, quote unquote, to quote Kirk Herbstreit. It's a bigger group than you think.
Yeah. So there's 2 schools of thought, which is that one. And Dot, we appreciate you being here. But I also, and you can correct me in the chat if you think I'm wrong, I've also seen you be very emotional here and upset. So it's easy to, for your perspective to change because when you're coming off of a win like the Tennessee win, and that's what winning does, right? It changes people's minds. But Andy, he's 67-10, and you hear this a lot. The guy's got 70 wins. I think if you boil it down to the biggest games, and now you have to add this Tennessee one on there.
Yes.
That he's coached there, I think he's 2-5. He's not paid to beat Maryland. He's not paid to beat Purdue, and he's not paid to stack wins against teams in 39-point spread games. He's paid to beat Michigan. He's paid to win the Big Ten championship, and he's paid to compete for and win the national title. So I appreciate that Ohio State fans are excited, and they should be. I think they have a very good chance to win the national championship. And honestly speaking, if I could go back and do my bracket, I'd probably pick them again. I've been on the Ohio State's winning the national title train since the beginning. I changed my mind, obviously, because of the Michigan game. But if they're going to be who they were against Tennessee, there is no team in this bracket that they cannot beat. But I am not going to sit here and be like, yeah, as long as you're 70-10, you're good there. That's not what the job is. It's not the job that he signed up for willingly. He knows that. He knows that he's not paid to do those things. So, in this moment, and again, I've never once said he should be fired, but I think it's rational as a fan, if you are an Ohio State fan and you are upset about this, to want him to be fired, because that is the reality of being the head coach at Ohio State. So, he's not going to be. But Andy, I agree with Dodd. Losing 3 times in a row to Michigan when they make the playoff is great. That makes sense.
It's not great.
No, I'm saying
yeah.
Excusing that is what I mean. I can understand that, because sometimes teams just lose to better teams, or sometimes teams lose to good teams. But how many years in a row do you get before it's like if he goes 0-7 but is 89 or 110 and 20, how much of it do you take? So and also too, the results are commensurate with the investment in the program, right? He has got a great record, but he also has a $20 million roster. If he was 7-6 this year, they would blast him into the sun. It cannot happen. Anybody could coach the Ohio State's roster this year to 10-2. So that. And I'm not trying to say that his wins don't matter.
Well, I'll go back to something Dan Mullen said when he was coaching at Florida. They'd won, I think, the Orange Bowl, and they had a pretty big improvement. And I think they were at that point a 10-win team. And he was like, improving to 10 wins is not really the hard part. It's improving to 11 wins and 12 wins and 13 wins. That is the truly hard part.
How many coaches, Andy, in college football right now, active percentage-wise, do you think could go 10-2 with this roster?
90. Everybody who isn't completely incompetent. And so the Crimson Card asks, who do you hire, Ari? Well, you could hire Mike Vrabel if he would take it, if he didn't want an NFL job. Also, you could hire any one of all of the college football coaches who would crawl across broken glass to hire Ohio.
Yeah, I don't love
coach at Ohio State. So
the who do you hire discourse, because the who do you hire discourse only pertains to places that can't get literally anyone they want. So
yeah, Ohio State can get anyone. So, but again, this is not. It's interesting because this is not a fire Ryan Day or don't fire Ryan Day discussion. It's more of a discussion about understanding how people feel and how customers feel. And that's the part that I think is interesting, because I go back to 2015. And this was my first year doing radio at SiriusXM. And I remember there was a story that came out in the Advocate in Baton Rouge. Scott Rabelais wrote it. It was clearly floated by the LSU administration. The LSU administration is floating this story. Hey, we may fire Les Miles. This was 2 weeks to go in the season. And it was a test balloon to see how the public sentiment was going to trend. And I read the story. I'm like, oh wow, this is clearly a trial balloon. Let's talk about this on the show. And I did. And it was very interesting. We took a ton of calls back then. Every call from someone who wasn't an LSU fan was like, how could they fire Les Miles? Every call from someone who was an LSU fan was they should have done this 2 years ago. What were they waiting for? And I learned the people paying the closest attention are the people you need to listen to.
Yeah. And here, Andy, and I think Goat Dog's an Ohio State fan too. I think I see him on Twitter a lot. He tweeted, if they beat Michigan with a new coach and end the year 10-2, then what? And this is the crux of the issue. If Ohio State were 10-2 right now with a win over Michigan, we would not be having this discussion.
And they'd still be in the playoff, by the way.
And they'd still be in the playoff. So beating Michigan is the problem. That's the problem. It's not that they haven't won the national title in 10 years. It's that they've lost.
So that's also a problem for Ohio State.
Yeah. So, and that's not his whole burden. They didn't win the national championship in the last 4 years of Urban. So that's the deal. And the thing you have to understand about Ohio State fans is, and I said this on the phone yesterday to somebody who's writing a story about this. Ohio State fans care and covet the Michigan rivalry more, I think, than any other fan base in any sport in terms of what the rivalry win means to them. I actually think that they care more about winning the rivalry game than Michigan fans. And maybe that's just my perspective because my entire career, Michigan wasn't winning it and they just kind of became apathetic, and maybe that's different now. But that is really, really, really the crux of this whole thing. Beating Michigan is one of those 3 goals. And if they beat Michigan 2 out of the last 4 years and Michigan was really good, that's so much more reasonable.
And also not having this conversation at that point.
And also going 0-3 and then beating the layup version of Michigan. We're not having this discussion right now. So, like, yeah, this is funny. As a Michigan fan, this is like crack, but it's true. You can't, you got to whittle it down to this question, Andy, is can Ohio State's head coach in 2024 and beyond, where losing to Michigan doesn't stop you from competing for and potentially winning a national championship, be successful at Ohio State? And some people might say yes, because if Ohio State does go out and win the national title this year, they're going to love it. But I would say no, because I understand how it.
I would say if they're winning national championships, it doesn't matter if they're beating Michigan. And I realize you think differently. I'm telling you right now, you win 2 of the next 5 national titles, and you go 1-4 against Michigan during those years. You're still fine.
Yeah, but I also think too that there's a correlation between being able to beat your rival and how successful you are in high pressure.
But I also here's the other thing, Ari, and this is the part. Winning. We're all excited about what happened in the Tennessee game. They looked amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know when they also looked like that offensively? What other game this year? Was there only one other game this year they looked like that dominant
Oregon.
Offensively? Yeah. Did they win that game?
No.
Okay.
But that's what I wanted to say. And then
they're about to play 3 teams in a row like that.
Yeah, winning a national title is much harder now than it was last year, and certainly easier than it was 10 years ago. And it was hard to do it then. But the firing discourse or the playoff or bust discourse isn't about losing to Oregon. It's about losing to Michigan and then also not reaching your goal of the postseason.
And then also not
reaching
what I'm saying is a team that can lose to this Michigan team, if I'm betting, will not win 3 more in a row like this.
That's the point. So, like you're saying, if they win 3 or 2 titles in the next 5 years, but go 1-4 against Michigan, like those 2 things don't equate mathematically to me.
Right.
So why don't you
let's play the Doug clip. Our friend Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis on the Kings of the North show. They had an incredible discussion about this. It really kind of helped spawn this one. Let's listen to them.
About this, somebody asked about it. Sloopy. Thoughts on Herbstreit hating on OSU fans on the broadcast. So I just want to address this very quickly. We know this is not only an Ohio State audience. The Buckeyes aren't victims here. I think the loss to Michigan was as bad as any Ohio State loss in the last 20 years. And they did that. And that coaching staff did that. And I think Kirk Herbstreit is wounded, particularly when it comes to Ohio State fans. And he turns everything on fans. And he was talking about how the lunatic fringe has expanded. And I think he makes it too personal. And if you think the lunatic fringe has expanded, maybe it's that your definition of lunatics is no longer correct. Maybe what these people are just sort of justifiably, reasonably upset Ohio State fans that Ohio State on the most important weekend of the year for the 4th straight year came out and played a horrible game in the most important game of the year. So there is this very quick thing, and I don't like it when broadcasters do it. They act like fans turned against this team for no reason. That team played an awful game against an overmatched opponent with much more talent. They earned the doubt. They earned the sports hate. And so let's not forget in the end why any of this exists. It's because of the fans. So if you are a fan who is personally attacking a player on social media or sending death threats or whatever, then you are the lunatic fringe. If you're just mad that the team lost and you think maybe the coach should be fired if he doesn't do a better job, you're not a lunatic. So Herbie can chill with that stuff, because I'm a little sick of everybody coming after the fans all the time. And I'm sorry that Ohio State has high standards, but guess what? There are a whole bunch of fired up Ohio State fans in that stadium. And when they're good, they are rewarded and they are greeted as champions and heroes, just like with every other Northern team we have. And when you play below the expectations for people that are paying your salary, and that now extends to players, then it's okay for them to be upset. And the victimization, the constant victimization of these people, woe is me, oh, these poor guys. It was a terrible performance, and this was just as good. And guess what we're doing right now? Talking about how awesome it is. So just chill, Herbie.
Okay. So I thought that was a really great way of putting it, because it is reasonable for these guys to be upset. And Doug offers a great definition of what the real lunatic fringe is versus people who are just upset. And this is why I brought up the LSU example from 2015. Because Doug, I realize, has covered Ohio State, and Herbstreit played at Ohio State. And so it's easy to equate that this is different and more personal, and maybe it is. But I also think it has to do with when you are the people who broadcast the games, you look at these things differently. They are always automatically more protective of the coaches every single time. They never think any coach should ever be fired, ever. And I understand they have to keep those relationships with those guys, because we have the same thing. We have to talk to these guys too. Like I did, because I felt like I needed to personally apologize to Billy Napier for what I'd written and said, because he proved me wrong. Like, but I can't worry about it. Like if he'd said, screw you, I'm never speaking to you again, which he didn't, because he's a very professional guy. But if he'd said that, I'd understand. But it's my job to write honest, critical things.
Well,
and I go back to that LSU thing. Here's why. So remember, 2015, LSU administration floats the trial balloon 2 weeks before the season starts, 2 weeks before the season ends, that they're going to fire Les Miles. Well, the ESPN Mafia rallies. Like every broadcast, there's 2 more games. Both broadcasts are like, how could they possibly fire Les Miles? What are they thinking? These people are morons. And whips up the support and rallies the troops. Well, guess what? They wanted to fire Les Miles because he wasn't good at coaching LSU anymore. It took about 3 games into the next season to understand that. And then they fired him. Like, sometimes the people on the ground know better.
Yeah. But I think what Doug said was right. And here's the thing about the lunatic fringe. You know what I think the lunatic fringe is? The people who are making his family cry on the sidelines. That's who the lunatic fringe is.
Ryan Day's family.
Ryan Day's family, or the people who make anybody's, or if you're sending death threats or doing anything that, putting someone's address online, or, all the things that are harmful to a person's well-being, then I think you're like a nutbag and like you need to professional help. But if you are just simply upset, you as a person who consumes that product as an entertainment product has every right to be, any more than you and I are upset if the finale of a show sucks. Like you're allowed to be upset. Like it's
well,
not.
And here's the other thing. Like we see this on our side of the business as well. And obviously the ESPN people see it all the time too. But I think they don't pay as close attention to it because their numbers are different. They're bigger. Their scale's different. We pay attention to this because we have to. It's part of the job. And so we often have people telling us what they think we should do, like topics they think we should pick, which I appreciate. But I also am looking at the numbers. And so I see what they respond to. So when people say, we don't think you should talk about Colorado and Deion Sanders as much as you do. Well, no, every time we talk about them, the numbers explode. So we're going to talk about them. Your consumer behavior is important here. And so it's one thing if Ohio State fans say they're mad or go online and grouse about the coach. It's a completely different thing if the ticket prices for a playoff game at Ohio Stadium drop so low that 30,000 Tennessee fans can show up. Consumer behavior told us that this is real. Like I go back to when USC fired Clay Helton. The Coliseum was almost empty at the end. And that's why we know, and look, the buyout of Lincoln Riley is so high, but we know they're not ready for that yet. They're not there yet as a fan base. They don't have the same standards Ohio State has. They're not.
And what you just said is
empty stadium. Yep.
What you just said was 1,000% it. If it were the Lunatic Fringe only, tickets to get into Ohio Stadium for the first ever postseason playoff game in that building would not have been $97. That's it. That's a fact.
Yep.
How much were they at Notre Dame?
$500. How many Indiana fans got to know? Think about this. Indiana fans.
No Indiana fans.
Live within 3 hours of Notre Dame. Might even live in South Bend. Might even live, 5 minutes from the stadium. Barely any Indiana fans got tickets.
Now, listen, I understand it's also not apples to apples because Ohio State plays in playoff games basically every year and Notre Dame doesn't. And I also understand that Notre Dame has the best chance to potentially win a national title this year that they've ever had, or at least in the modern era. So, I understand that fan appetite, like for Tennessee to come up to Columbus was ramped up because it was their most important.
And Tennessee fans are as passionate as Ohio State fans. Sure. And it's a very small group of fan bases that are like that.
And like, I never want to sit in this chair and talk into a microphone and pretend like $150 for a ticket's not a lot of money. Okay, it is.
But in that case, it's not compared to what it could be.
In that case, for what it usually is, it was a lack of demand. And a lack of demand means one thing. People are upset. They're tired. And, frankly speaking, Ohio State has been in a lot of high-profile games over the course of the past 3 years. And they have come up short in just about every single one of them up until Saturday. So they almost beat Georgia. They almost beat Oregon. But people at Ohio State don't want almost. So, and I actually think they're going to win the national title now. So, and then we're going to have to unpack what that means later on. But it is such a complex scenario because also, too, I love Ryan Day.
Producer River with another point about consumer behavior. If that game was at Neyland Stadium this weekend, the tickets would have been $500 plus. So Tennessee fans actually probably save money.
Yeah.
Having to go, with gas and hotel, it's probably a wash going to Columbus.
Yeah. And if you did it right, or you traveled like we do, you go to the game, you pick up $100 seat, you go to the game, and then you drive down to Cincinnati and get a Fairfield to the suburbs for $100.
Yeah.
And
we went to Fort Wayne because we had to go to Columbus. Yeah. Fort Wayne was lovely, by the way.
Yeah. Fort Wayne was a nice.
Dark from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m., but it was lovely.
I got an icy in 12-degree weather at 3 a.m. I felt pretty electric.
You are a psychopath. But by the way, while we're talking about consumer demand and tickets, I think it's a great time to talk about Game Time. How do we know all these prices? Well, because we were on the Game Time app all week last week studying this stuff. Now, if you want to go on the Game Time app, because you may want to go to the Rose Bowl to watch Ohio State play against Oregon in what could be an absolute classic game, or maybe you want to go to the Sugar Bowl to watch Notre Dame and Georgia play in what looks like an awesome game. Well, you can get those tickets on Game Time. I'm looking at the Rose Bowl tickets right now. I've hit the GT Picks button, which shows me the best seats relative to market value. $237 for a seat, kind of, on the corner, looking in. You can see everything. These are not bad. Now, the difference is if you're from Ohio and you have to go across country, you got to factor that part in. But this is actually not bad for the Rose Bowl. And then the Sugar Bowl, it's a little bit tougher ticket because of those folks, but you can get in. You can get tickets to anything on Game Time, whether it's games, concerts, Broadway show or off-Broadway shows, comedy shows, you name it. They got your tickets. Download the Game Time app. Use the code STAPLES. Get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, of course. Game Time. Last-minute tickets. Best prices guaranteed. So easy. So if you're going to one of these bowl games, get your tickets on Game Time. Ari, this has been a really interesting discussion. I'm glad we had this discussion today. And then we are probably going to have it again if Ohio State loses the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. And
in a more serious fashion.
I want to express one thing about Ryan Day and to Ryan Day and to you. I think And I think he thinks he could have done or should have done a better job so far at Ohio State. I also want to express like remorse for what he goes through. You know what I mean? Like, it's not easy to be the Ohio State coach. And there is a lunatic fringe. And the lunatic fringe makes his living situation in Ohio untenable. You have got kids picking on their children in school. You've got security ramped up at their house. You got people driving by. Like, if you do that, you need professional help. Like, there's something wrong.
And you can say, he makes all this money. It doesn't matter. It also, his kids don't make all that money. And like, I live in a very small college town with a very big college football program. The head coach's kids have gone to school with my kids at the same school. Like, you do worry sometimes. Like, you wonder, what are they hearing? Like, how toxic is it around them? And that part of it really makes me sad. So,
and like, the criticism isn't the problem. You get paid a lot of money to deal with people like us talking about whether you've done a good enough job. It's part of his job. I just mean when it comes to like personal safety and happiness, like, that's insane. So, and I think everybody can agree on that. Most people in this chat agree with that, right? That is the lunatic fringe. And as it pertains to the lunatic fringe, there's a lunatic fringe to every fan base, everywhere. It's not just an Ohio State problem. It is a people problem.
But my other problem with this is people trying to tell the customer what they want when the customer knows what they want. Like, don't tell them you have to be happy with Ryan Day, or you have to be happy with, I don't know, Jim McElwain, or you have to be happy with Brian Harsin or Les Miles. Like, you don't have to be happy with anything. It's your money. Spend it the way you want. And don't let somebody on TV tell you what you have to be happy with or not.
Andy, I've got some big news for you that doesn't relate any of this.
Okay, let's go.
Just got the Finebaum invite.
Woo! Ari versus Finebaum.
I'm going today. I'm going to go on today. So,
you going to yell at him?
Yeah.
You're going to get hot?
I mean, it depends on what he says.
Saucy? Like,
I don't.
You're going to have some Wendy's ghost pepper nugs beforehand? I mean, you basically said that Finebaum's trying to ruin college football.
Yeah. No,
you said he was trying to destroy college football.
I think his viewpoint is the biggest threat to college football. I don't know that he's trying to destroy it, but if what he thinks comes true, it would. But
let's reset that. Let's reset that before, and then we'll talk about the bowl games, because we got to talk about. There's like a full week of college football coming up that we need to talk about. But let's reset the Finebaum thing, because it was the discourse over the weekend. Indiana loses badly. SMU loses badly. It was really those two. And they're like, you should have put Alabama and Ole Miss. That would have been better. And Paul obviously criticized the committee. And Ari basically said he was trying to destroy the sport.
Yeah. So we've talked about the playoff and the merits of getting into the playoff so much this year. And I think that there is a thought process, or was this weekend, that the committee is personally responsible for us getting blowouts, and that they've made poor or wrong decisions in putting SMU and Indiana into the field. And that just makes me very upset, because I was already against or fearful of a 12-team field because of what it would mean to the importance of the regular season. That obviously turned out to not be true. But if you actually strip the meaning of games and say that Alabama or Ole Miss or South Carolina's games are more or less important or more important than SMU's games, then you're going to put the sport in a really bad position. I think if you don't care about the record and the statistics and the resumes of teams, and simply just go based on feel, that putting Alabama in over SMU makes SMU's games worthless and everybody else in SMU's position worthless. I think Alabama would have put up a better fight in the playoff than SMU did. I think that Alabama would have put a better fight up against Notre Dame in the field if they put them in. So both of these things can be true at the same time. What I can't live with is putting Alabama in because of that and that alone. Sometimes in sports, the best teams don't win. It is up to Alabama to do their end of the bargain, which is take care of their opportunities that they had in the regular season to put themselves in a position to compete against Notre Dame. They didn't do that. And there are penalties and consequences for that. And if you take away the balance and the metrics that we use, then we are in anarchy. We are no longer valuing the importance of winning games the way that SMU did and the way that Indiana did. And then we no longer have reason or discussion or anything. It's just, who do you think would be the best? And I think that there is this like crisis in college football between most deserving and best. And what is the committee's job, right? Is the committee's job just...
The committee's job is best. It's always said best.
Okay, so if that's the case, then do roster makeup at the beginning of the year and don't play games. Because Alabama could be because Alabama could be 7-5 and I could still think they're better. Like, where do you draw the line? There has to be a place where you draw the line.
24-3 Oklahoma is that's a pretty bright line.
And like, that's it. And still, after the 24-3 loss to Oklahoma, Andy, I still think that Alabama from top to bottom is probably a better football team than Indiana. But at what point do you penalize the better team for not doing what they need to do? That's the point of the games. So, if it was best, then they got it wrong. It can't be the best. You want to know why? Because the games determine who the best is, not what we think. Because we're wrong all the time. We were wrong about TCU Michigan 2 years ago. And if there's one Cinderella every 10 years, we have to put the playoff in a position where the Cinderella can make it to the ball. You can't, because if not, then, or like what you said, separate them and they're not playing the same sport or the same championship anymore.
It's again consumer behavior. You keep telling us what you want, and what you want is Super League, and you'll get one if you keep telling us that.
And if you didn't like the SMU and Indiana game, then maybe in 5 years, SMU and Indiana. And the funniest thing about Indiana is they play in the Super League.
They play in the Big Ten. Yeah.
But if you don't like SMU and you don't like, the teams that are, not big brands or haven't recruited at a certain level, then maybe you don't like them playing on the same field or in the same sport. And if that's the case, you might get your wish. But if they would have put Alabama in over SMU this year, I think that would have been a catastrophic mistake, even though I think they're better. Because then what you're doing is telling a large segment of fans that don't live in the South that their teams don't matter. And I think that is the biggest threat to college football imaginable. And I think that's rational. So, and I'm always the one that's been the bias towards the big brands, right? But I also think that winning the national championship, Andy, isn't just if you win playoff games. It's whether or not you did enough in the regular season to earn the playoff spot. Like, winning a national championship isn't a 4-game season. It's an entire season. In Alabama, what they did this year was not national championship worthy, whether they're the best or not. The same way the best teams in the country in the NFL and in the NBA choke in the playoffs too, or have bad years. Sometimes, like the Miami Dolphins, right? They had a bad injury and they sucked for half the year, and now they're on the playoff bubble. They may not make the playoff, and they still might be one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the NFL when Tua and everyone's healthy. The Tyreek is cold. Yeah, but you see what I'm saying? Like, things happen in sports where the best team doesn't always win. And you know what the thing that happened to Alabama was? They had a really bad regular season this year. They might be a top 8 team in the country, but they didn't play like one, and there's consequences for that. And if there are no consequences for losing, then why play? That's my stance on it.
Ari versus Paul Finebaum today. What time is it?
Am I nuts? Do you agree with me?
Maybe. I just like stringing you along on this because you just spent like 5 minutes pouring your soul out, and it's more fun to be nonchalant about it. And you're just like, what? Wait. Of course, I agree with you.
And the thing that I think people lose, and the thing that I think people lose track of in this entire discourse, and I'm going to say this on the show today, is that I think Alabama and Ole Miss are better than SMU and Indiana. Both can be true at the same time. I can think a team is better. But you want to know something? What I think is wrong all the freaking time. So we have to the one thing that we have in terms of hard data, which is the results of the regular season games and what they mean. And if you play a harder schedule like Alabama does, you are rewarded with more rope and more leeway to lose an extra game. They lost a third. That's
a
25%.
very mediocre team.
And that's 25%
And
of their
got
games.
destroyed in the process.
So who are we trying to protect here? Are we trying to protect them? So we can have and you know what? Here's the other thing. And you said this while we were eating lunch. Who's to say Alabama doesn't go to Penn State and get their ass kicked?
They went to Oklahoma and got their ass kicked. Oklahoma's not nearly as good as Penn State. So,
And
yeah, we know.
people, because when you tweet stuff like that, people think you're a very influential person in this business. If you tweet, "Thanks a lot, committee, take a bow," general people who don't think about this 24 hours a day like me and you do think that that's the truth. They think that the committee did something wrong. And in my opinion, the committee should be putting in the teams that illustrated during the regular season that they're worthy of competing for the national championship.
I will point out that's not Paul Finebaum's job. What network will you be appearing on later today,
Yeah,
Ari?
I get it.
Okay,
I'm gonna walk through it. Yeah, I know.
All politics are local. Hey, Ari, do you want to win a date with Tad Hudson?
Yes.
Do you know who Tad Hudson is?
Yes.
Who's Tad Hudson?
But Tad Hudson's the quarterback for Coastal Carolina.
There you go.
You put me on
Tad
the spot,
Hudson
everyone,
will
and
be
I buzzed him.
The starting QB for the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers in the Myrtle Beach Bowl today against UTSA. You can play Tad Hudson square on PrizePicks. This is big game for him because their top two quarterbacks are in the portal. He's going to play Owen McCown playing for UTSA, the lefty. You know how UTSA likes its lefty quarterbacks. So Tad Hudson, his number is 170.5 passing yards. You decide if it's more or less. When you're playing PrizePicks, best daily fantasy game in America, download the app, use the code Staples, play $5, get $50 instantly. You can also play a little Monday Night Football tonight. Got the NFL as well. You got a little Jordan Love against Spencer Rattler. Yeah, Spencer Rattler's starting for an NFL team today. That's right. So you decide more or less than 174.5 passing yards for Spencer Rattler. You pick at least two squares. The more squares you pick, the higher the potential payout. Download PrizePicks. Use the code Staples when you sign up. Play $5, get $50 instantly. Ari, it is bowl season. 35 minutes from now, the Myrtle Beach Bowl kicks off, which, by the way, I did advocate for us to sponsor that game. I sent a pitch deck to Shannon Terry, our boss, when I got hired. Hey, I don't think it would cost us that much in the grand scheme to sponsor this game, to put our name, like the show's name or On3's name on the game. We got to do this one of these years, like have our own bowl game.
Well, it's been our goal since we got together to get a bowl game sponsor.
Yeah. So I would even partner with one of our partners, like if Panini wants us to do it, and we just rip packs while we're calling the game. Because see, Ari and I are going to call the game. Like if it's our game, I'm putting us in the booth. Producer River and JD Piquel will be your sideline reporters, and it would be gorgeous. It would be beautiful. So, especially in Conway, South Carolina, on teal turf.
Yeah,
how amazing would that
be?
be?
Do some grab ass halftime show competition where like who can run the fastest or throw the ball like.
Oh, absolutely!
It would be punt, pass, and pork, Andy, to honor you, and it would be 2 physical activities and then an eating challenge at the end.
I love it. It would be beautiful. Like, how many pounds of pulled pork can you eat? Oh my God! Scott's Barbecue in Hemingway, South Carolina, one of the greatest barbecue places in the world. Like we get pulled pork from there, and yes. You throw the ball as far as you can. You try to embrace your inner Joe Milton. Then you punt it. You try to embrace your inner J.K. Scott. And then you have to eat as much pulled pork as you can in 5 minutes. That's the greatest halftime show of all time.
Yeah.
The Andy and Ari Bowl. The On3 Andy and Ari Bowl from Conway, South Carolina. Ari, we have to make this happen.
I've never been
Justin, our ad sales guy, we're calling him after the show today.
I've never been there, but I belong.
You've never
on the
been to
fuel
Conway,
side.
South Carolina?
Mm-mm.
Oh my. Have you ever seen a pickup truck with a leveling kit? Do you know what that is?
I do. What?
It's when they make the top point up and the back point down. And you can do it with a
I
pickup
have
truck
seen that.
or a large SUV. There are more of those per capita in the Myrtle Beach metropolitan area than any place in the country.
I always thought that was a suspension issue. So when that happened, so
They do it on purpose.
Why? What does it do?
I
What's
don't know. I have no idea.
Okay.
It is amazing.
I also think lowered trucks are stupid.
Well, yes, because speed bumps exist.
Yeah,
And of
I
course,
don't know.
You're also talking to someone whose truck is like jacked up beyond belief. So, like,
Yeah,
I would
that's
drive
where
a
your
monster truck if it
sits.
were socially acceptable.
But your truck sits there naturally. You didn't do anything to it.
I didn't, but if I had bought a different model, I would have lifted it. So
Yeah.
I would have lifted it to that point. But I'm not slanting it. I'm just lifting it. So my redneck variation is better than their redneck variation. I'm just throwing that out there.
I never understood the lowrider hopping thing either.
It's just, hitting switches.
I mean, it's cool. I think it's cool to look at, but like that would get nauseous in there.
You do get car sick. So, all right,
I
let's
do.
talk about these bowl games because we have a whole week of bowls. Friday and Saturday is a very packed schedule. I'm really excited about it, actually. The last time I was this excited about the Birmingham Bowl, there was a guy with poop on his pants scoring a touchdown. Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt, like Haynes King's playing, Diego Pavia is playing. Georgia Tech's a 2.5-point favorite. That's going to be a blast to watch.
It seems to me there are less opt-outs this year, no?
There are. I like Eric Singleton's not playing for Georgia Tech. He has signed with Auburn, by the way. That recruitment is done. But no, it feels like there are more stars. For example, BYU Colorado in the Alamo Bowl. We're going to see Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter. And I think that's cool. I was watching Colorado put out, all the YouTube videos they put out. They had, scenes from practice for the game with Travis Hunter. I mean, Travis Hunter's won the Heisman. He's going to be a top 5 pick in the draft. He didn't have to play in this game, but he is probably getting paid to do it too. And I think that's a big part of it. I think there's NIL deals that are attached to this that are causing them to play.
Yeah, I think that watching Colorado is just entertaining, period. So,
Yes.
I think that it is interesting. You know what? I actually had this thought because this morning when I was getting my daughter ready for school at 6 a.m, and I was thinking about how busy my day is today, I was like, it does not feel like it's the day before Christmas Eve. And the reason why it doesn't is because bowl games have been overshadowed because of the extended playoff. Like there are more playoff games, so there's less random games like this on TV, or it feels like it because you only have so much bandwidth to keep up with everything.
Let me explain to Nathan what's going on here, because Nathan in the chat asked, wait, aren't teams from the same conference not supposed to be in bowl games against each other? That is true, but the current bowl deals use the old conference alignment. So BYU is the Big 12 team in this game, and Colorado is actually the Pac-12 team in this game because the Alamo Bowl is Big 12, Pac-12.
It's electric.
It's
if you want
amazing.
anything in the sport to make sense, just go find a different sport. It ain't happening.
Exactly. Another game that's great, and I want to praise the people who put on this game because I've been critical of the bowl people in general over the years, and I think they had control of the sport for too long. They clearly don't anymore, and I'm glad because they're pretty useless. But the people who run the Pop-Tarts Bowl, Florida Citrus Sports, that does the Pop-Tarts Bowl, that does the Citrus Bowl, they have done such a good job, especially with this Pop-Tarts Bowl game. Iowa State and Miami, it's going to be a really good game. Both teams as close to full strength as you're going to see in a game like this. It's going to be a fun game. They made, we saw last year where you could eat the mascot. They have one up themselves this year. The trophy is a working toaster. You can toast Pop-Tarts in the trophy.
The thing with Pop-Tarts is that people always eat them raw. I think they're supposed to be in the toaster.
Psychopaths. You put them in the toaster. They're toaster pastries, for God's sake.
I see people have Pop-Tart, the two that come in the single package. They grab the package out and like take it with them.
It's an easy, quick breakfast, and I've done it. I did that as a kid, but I'm not a savage anymore. I put them in the toaster. Pop quiz, best Pop-Tart flavor.
I think it's the brown sugar cinnamon one.
Wrong. That's number 2. It's frosted blueberry, but good, close.
Yeah,
close.
But you know this about me. I don't love sweets in the morning. Like I'm not a big.
Oh, I understand that.
I don't like I've never been a Danish donut, jelly guy in the morning. So
you are a savory person in general. We had this conversation when you were saying that shame eating fast food burgers and fries is better than shame eating a Cinnabon. By the way, I was driving home last night from the airport, stopped in the gas station to get some coffee, and it was one with a Cinnabon. I nearly bought a 2-pack of Cinnabon and shame ate them, but I didn't.
Shame eating happens when you're depressed or upset or you shouldn't be eating. Like shame eating.
I should not. Well, that was a time because I had most of a pizza with you for lunch.
Yeah.
And it was 9:30 at night. So that would have been qualified as shame eating.
You want to know what shame eating is? And I totally think people should do it because Wendy's is our sponsor, but like the pre-dinner double stack. Like you go through and you don't tell anybody, you hide the trash. Like if you haven't hid your trash from your significant other, then you have never lived. Okay.
Let me tell you what a horrible person I was in high school. I don't know that I'm much better now, but I feel like I've become a better human being as I've gotten older. But I was a terrible human being in high school, and here's how I know. So I was on the wrestling team in high school, but the first year I wrestled, the heavyweight division was, well, actually both years, the heavyweight division was capped at 275 pounds. It wasn't until much later in life that I crested over 275 pounds. I was way under. Like I had 40 or 50 pounds to play with. And obviously my teammates were much closer to their weight class numbers and had to be very careful about what they ate and what they did right before a match because they had to weigh in. And if you're 135, you have to weigh in correctly, or you either have to wrestle up or you're out. And the lineup is set. So you gotta make weight. I was such an asshole that I would leave school, go to Wendy's, get 4 double stacks, which were 99 cents at the time.
That was the golden era of the country.
A biggie fry, a large drink, sometimes a biggie frosty, sometimes not. And I would bring it back and sit in the locker room and just eat the Wendy's in front of all the guys that were trying to make weight. I was like, this is delicious. And then I'd step on the scale and weigh like 5 pounds more than I did at the beginning of the day. But it didn't matter because I had 40 pounds to play with. That's how much of a jerk I was.
Yeah.
But I love you, Wendy's.
I watched this show on Netflix. I don't know if it's on Netflix anymore, called Kingdom. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's like an MMA show, but it's also a family drama. It's one of the best shows that you can watch.
Oh, I need to watch this. I've not seen it.
It's amazing. And they show somebody all the time, like trying to make weight for an MMA fight, and like the cut part of it where you're, putting the bags on yourself and sitting in the sauna and running around and all the way of like losing 15 pounds in a day. And I'm like, I think I can do that. Go, I lose 15 pounds in a day.
Tyler said it's a miracle the boys didn't deliver a code red on you. And you see, that's the thing. Like, so in high school, our wrestling room was attached to our football locker room. And so all of the other football players were still there. And like, so I had the whole offensive line with me. We weren't really worried about 135-pound wrestlers. That was not a concern for us because, yes, in a wrestling match, maybe they try to hit me with the crossface rooster, but in a everything else, weight classes matter. So we weren't particularly worried about that. But Ari, getting back to my original point about the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which we've strayed far from. People talk about, oh, these bowl games don't matter, blah, blah. Okay, the bowl games matter. Like, it doesn't matter which game it is. When you have an exciting game and the team pulls out a win and you see them celebrate, clearly it matters. It matters because there's a ball and a scoreboard. That's why it matters. But also, you can make your game relevant if you want by making it interesting, by doing fun things, by being creative. And the people at the Pop-Tarts Bowl and as much as I'm loath to say it, the people at the Duke's Mayo Bowl, like they have made their games fun and relevant and interesting. What was the first thing we thought about when we found out Bill Belichick was going to be hired at North Carolina? Oh my God, he might get Mayo dumped on him. Like, that is keeping your game front of mind. That is being creative and fun and making sure everybody enjoys it. So, all you other bowl folks complaining about the lack of relevance and how things have changed in the playoff, and guess what? You're about to get the bowl system removed from the playoff because I don't care if there are 4 blowouts. Home games in the playoff were freaking awesome. So the bowl games are going to suck by comparison. They're going to get them taken away. Playoffs going to campuses. But you can still make your bowl games interesting. Just have a working toaster as your trophy. That's all.
Isn't this fun? I mean, sometimes we get into this business and everything is so serious. And the idea of 2 Pop-Tarts coming out of a toaster football, it's fantastic. I can't wait to try that.
I actually texted Dan Radakovich, the Miami AD, that's the person you saw talking in that video. I texted him afterward. I'm like, does the AD get to keep the trophy if his team wins? The people need to know.
I just thought it was so funny when you could eat the mascot last year, how everybody was like, okay, everybody stick around for the game and then watch the ritual sacrifice after.
People were very excited to sacrifice that mascot. And again, I love the people who do this game, whether it's the folks at Florida Citrus Sports who put it on, or the people at, I'm hoping I'm not messing up Pop-Tarts parent company. I believe it's General Mills. The people at the parent company who insist that the mascot from last year can't make appearances because he's dead because he got eaten. Like, it's amazing. The commitment to the bit is the best part. So can't wait for that game. Iowa State against Miami. We got a full week of college football, and we got playoff games to talk about. Let me explain how the schedule is going to work this week, because obviously the big holiday right in the middle of the week. So we will have an episode tomorrow. Ari and I are going to talk to Cody Belair, one of our national scouts at On3, about the guys in the transfer portal who are appearing at their new places now. Like, what's Jackson Arnold going to look like at Auburn? What does he bring to Auburn? What does Mateer bring to Oklahoma? We're going to talk about that on Tuesday. New faces, new places, what to expect from that. How to start you getting excited for 2025. Christmas Day, no show. Thursday, we'll be back with our picks for the quarterfinals and the playoff. That's right. Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, Arizona State, Boise State, Penn State. It's all happening. Everybody, if you got stuff going on, you got to wrap presents. We understand we might not be with us on Christmas Eve. If we don't see you again until Thursday, have a Merry Christmas. But if you want to get excited, come on back tomorrow. Talking portal, talking new faces, new places, reasons to be pumped for 2025. We'll talk to you then.